There we go. So for those that are just joining us, this is being recorded, so you didn't miss a thing. So, as people are getting settled, just wanted to say hi. I'm Julie Slavinsky. I'm the director of events at Warwick's, and we're here with Caroline Woods and Claudia Craven. And so, while people are getting settled, just real quick, Caroline, tell us really quick where you're calling in from today.
I am calling from Riverside, Illinois, which is where I live, and I'm actually at the Riverside Public Library right now.
Awesome. We love our public libraries. It's banned book week this week, so
Yes, yeah.
we're all going to make sure we take care of that. It's just like I've been seeing some excellent author interviews about the banned books, and so crazy stuff going on. Oh, and Claudia, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Kingston, New York, from my home. Kingston's about 100 miles north of New York City, right on the Hudson River.
Love it. We were talking in the green room a little bit before y'all came in about that's an area that I would just love to visit. It just looks idyllic. So kudos to you. But yeah, and you came from California. If
Yeah,
that's yeah.
yeah. So where I live now is right across the river from where I went to college. So that's how I knew the area.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for those of you that don't know, I think a lot of people that watch this know who Warwick's is and where we're at. But for those that don't, we're located in San Diego, La Jolla, just a little bit north of San Diego. So little signs there says since 1896. Yes, we have been a bookstore since 1896. Been in La Jolla since the 30s and the building that we're at since the 50s. So if you are in the San Diego area, we would love for you to come by the store. But for tonight, I'm going to put both Caroline and Claudia's books in the chat. So feel free to go ahead and click on those and order them. But if you're in the area, come by and see us and pick them up in person because that's always a fun thing to do, come to the store. Claudia and Caroline are going to talk for about 30, 35-ish minutes. I know we all know Zoom and I know we all know this stuff, but just real quick, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and pop questions in, and you can pop those questions in anytime you feel like it. But when they're done with their conversation, I'm going to pop that, come back in and bring those questions to them. So questions can be for both, and no question is, all questions are welcome. Well, maybe not all, but I'll be filtering it. I'm teasing. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not all. So before we waste too much more time, let me get these wonderful authors introduced, and I'll go away for a little bit, and we'll start the conversation. So Caroline Woods holds an MFA in fiction from Boston University. She is the author of the novels The Lunar Housewife and Fräulein M. And she has taught fiction writing at Loyola University Chicago, Boston University, and the Boston Conservatory. She was raised in Delaware, and as she says, she is actually in the Chicago area with her husband and two daughters. She's here today to talk about her new book, which I absolutely loved, and you are all in for a treat. The Mesmerist. Can't wait for this conversation. Joining her is Claudia Cravens. Claudia grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, as she said. She has a BA in literature from Bard College and participated in Catapult's 12-month novel generator. Her novel, Lucky Red, was a USA Today bestseller, a Good Morning America buzz pick, and was named a best debut of 2023 by Kirkus Reviews, Autostraddle, and Apple Books. And as we already know, she lives in the Hudson Valley. So ladies, have a great conversation, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. I'm so excited to get to talk to you, Caroline. I love this book. It's so complex. It's got so much going on. I want to know everything about your thought process for creating this book and drawing us into this world. So to start with, I would love to know, like, what was the initial spark for this book? Like, what was the thing that drew you in initially?
Sure. And I just want to say I am so excited to chat with you because I loved Lucky Red.
Thank you.
And I'm very honored to be here with you. So the spark for the Mesmerist was the Bethany Home for Unwed Mothers. I was looking for topics about the Gilded Age that were closer to home for me living in the Midwest, and started reading about like Jane Addams in Chicago. Women, I was interested in women who were working at the time to make the lives of other women better, because it runs counter to what we've heard a lot about the Gilded Age, which is like rampant income inequality. And I came across this Bethany Home for Unwed Mothers in Minneapolis that operated starting in the 1870s. But the book is set in 1894. The thing that really stood out to me about these women who ran the Bethany Home was that it was part of their mission to treat unwed mothers with dignity and respect, and an ethos that like everybody's deserving of a second chance, or a fresh start, which runs counter to, I think, the what would have been the prevailing attitude toward unwed mothers at the time, which was that they were like ruined.
Yeah.
A moral judgment. Most of the women who went into the Bethany Home were sex workers, but not all of them. And these women who ran the Bethany Home, who were affiliated with various churches, also had a really interesting kind of alliance with the madams of the town. It was all just absolutely fascinating to me. But you can't necessarily write a whole novel just about like women treating other women kindly. I needed some sort of
Yeah.
conflict. So there had to be something else. So as I was reading about Minneapolis in the 1880s, 1890s, very quickly I came across this very salacious true crime, a murder that happened in Minneapolis in 1894 that made national headlines. But I thought I had never heard of and has not gotten as much press as like H.H. Holmes in Chicago, or Devil in the
Yeah.
White. So I thought, okay, these two stories are going to be tied together. And it actually ended up being easier than I thought to put the two together.
Nice. Um, that is so cool, like as a way in, and yeah, and especially like this Bethany Home, sort of powered by the radical notion that women are people. Um,
So well
and
put.
it's but it's like it's so progressive, and like even today that would be seen as so progressive. So can you talk a little bit about like how you see progressivism in this book, and like does it tie to where you see it today?
Yes, yes, and yes. What I saw, one of my main sources for research was the diaries of Abby Mendenhall. So one of the women who was in the Sisterhood of Bethany, she was the treasurer. She seemed like the one who was at the home the most. And fortunately, I could read like 40 years worth of journals and correspondence. And
Amazing.
yeah, and what I started to see in her journals, and I may have been projecting some of like my own frustration sometimes with progressivism, is you can feel powerless against the power structures that exist. And that would have especially been true in a time when women couldn't even vote or hold office except for school board. And actually, it was one of the women on the Sisterhood of Bethany was the first woman on the Minneapolis school board. So
Oh my
even that
goodness.
was new. Yeah, Charlotte Van Cleve was on the school board. They didn't have a whole lot of power. They didn't have a lot of control over money. Um, and they couldn't control things like the wages that women could earn, or what rent,
Yeah.
what the rent was in the city, whether a landlord could just discriminate against a single mom. Imagine having to leave with your child, because they gave the women the option to keep their children, which was also considered radical. Well, their options were limited coming out of the home. And I have Abby
Yeah.
wrestle with that at one point in the story, where one of the
Hmm.
girls confronts her with, hey, the best way to get out of here is to get married. Or we go back to working at the brothel where we
Yeah.
pay a lot better. And Abby does not want to think the best way to get out of here is to get married, because they're trying to give them job training.
Hmm.
So she's really wrestling with that. And I think that people can probably relate today, because we want to make change, and sometimes you're just feel like you're up against huge structures that are in place and very hard to move.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, their frustration is so relatable, and their frustration with like the systemic problems where like the solution seems to be, well, go back in time and don't do that. Or
Yeah.
like, next time be born rich. Duh.
Yes, just don't
Yeah.
get pregnant. Undo
Yeah,
it. Yes.
duh. Your knowledge of this world is so detailed. I would love to know what your research process was like and like what was important to you to get right to build this world.
Sure. Oh, that's a great question. I always try to do a many-faceted approach. I read things like, nonfiction books about the time and place, as specific as I can get them. Um,
Mhm.
like I read a book called Minneapolis Madams by Penny Peterson. That was extremely,
Cool.
well, that's nonfiction. And that goes into the Bethany, the Sisterhood of Bethany too. And a book called The Notorious Harry Hayward, which was or the infamous Harry Hayward, which is about the crime, and that's all about Minneapolis. But then it's important to me to get the just the little details about the life, like
Hmm.
I think when I first started writing historical fiction, I felt as if I had to know everything that was going on in the world at that time, like a history of
Hmm.
all the battles of World War II, if you're writing a book set in 1941. And then I
Yeah.
realized you don't need to do that. What you really need to know is what they would eat for breakfast. And
Hmm.
the best details are the ones that are different from what we have today. So I do things like I read fiction that was written then, or diaries.
Hmm.
Um, I reread The Awakening by Kate Chopin because I was
Oh,
like,
awesome.
it's a great book. It's a feminist book written in the same time period. And like I was interested in that. How would a woman
Yeah.
who was considered radical have spoken to other women, and also what did they wear? What did they eat?
Hmm.
How did they complain about the weather? All that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But all of that stuff is I really strongly agree with you when writing historical fiction because like for people who don't know my book, it's set in 1877 in Dodge City and it's I feel the same way that like the thing that's so important to get right is like that stuff of everyday life, like you said, what they eat for breakfast and like, how your clothes feel on your body and what the air smells like. It's, like that's sort of where we live and die as in everyday life. And so I so agree with you that like you got to get that right.
And I
Um,
found it really satisfying and well done in Lucky Red. I mean,
oh, thank
everything like
you.
the yeah, the material of their clothes and the fact that the gun is a little derringer, it's just like the details were great and perfect and inspirational to
Oh,
me.
thank you so much. That's such a lovely thing to say.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of visual research, old photographs and like
Yeah.
historical movies and stuff. It's so fun.
I just told someone I feel fortunate that I've only written books set in a time when photography existed because
Yeah,
photographs
totally.
are really helpful. I don't know how people do it without that.
We gotta just like, we all aspire to the gold standard of Hilary Mantel, and she probably just looks at tons of old paintings of Henry VIII. I don't know.
I know.
Um, this is so cool. So then, like thinking about, the progressive side of this book is so practical, so pragmatic, and so grounded. And then there's this flip side of spiritualism and mesmerism. And tell me about what interested you about like bringing in this side of it.
So it came in by necessity because the criminal, and I avoid talking too much about it because I give away the plot, but the
Hmm.
murderer who is in this book was rumored to be a mesmerist. And it was an acceptable defense in those days to say, well, I like co-conspirators could claim to have been mesmerized, and
What?
it was successfully used in court. That's how much people believed in this. So you could say
Whoa.
I was mesmerized to kill someone, and there is a pretty good chance you would get a lesser sentence, and you could maybe even accuse someone else of it happened.
It's like a
Um,
witch trial.
kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was this brief time when it seemed like it was. It actually, I'm going to go on a slight tangent, but it made me think a little bit about like the Manson family
Oh,
murders,
totally.
claiming to have been under the influence of a very powerful personality, and like how far do we allow that to go? It's fascinating. But this the he was definitely very bad and very persuasive. But the rumor was that he was a mesmerist. And there were a couple reasons for that. The year that he committed this crime was the year that Trilby, the novel Trilby, was published, which
Hmm.
introduced the character Svengali, who
Oh,
was a
no kidding.
mesmerist. He mesmerizes a young woman. He gets her totally under his control, and it results in her death eventually. I think he withdraws the power and she just collapses. Very dramatic. But so that was very popular. It was in the popular imagination that year, mesmerism through Trilby. But I also have read an explanation that with the invention of the telegraph and the telephone, the Victorian mind was primed to accept that there were invisible forms of communication that we hadn't previously discovered or believed in. So if you could pick up the phone in Chicago and call California, you could maybe also um, move your fingers a certain way and make someone else do your bidding or cure their headache or, you know, whatever, anything invisible. So people were starting to like hire mesmerists to help them go to sleep at night as entertainment. And when I read some descriptions of what the entertainment was like, it really did remind me of some hypnotism shows that I've seen, like in college.
Right. So what, like you invite somebody over to your some guy in a tailcoat comes to your parlor and like makes
Yeah.
Lady Astor cluck like a chicken?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I put a scene like that in the book because I think this is too much fun. There are many mesmerists in this book, but I think I instantly knew to go back to like when I was first planning this book. I thought there should be a woman who is possibly a mesmerist. She comes into the Bethany home and she's going to be a counterbalance to him, to the other, the bad guy. Um,
Hmm.
and my editor and I talked a lot about it, like playing with what is real, um, how much of this book is going to seem possibly magical, or how much of it should be easily explained. So I tried to kind of walk that line. Well, like the power of suggestion is
Hmm.
very strong among these characters. And I also was really interested in how she would see it, like
Mm.
how this person who has been, very down on her luck, has not been treated well, and also possesses this sort of, she has a suggestive, persuasive power over the other people as well. And how does she see it, and how does she want to use it? That was really interesting to me.
That's super interesting. I had no idea that the connection with the telephone and the telegraph is really cool. Like it makes total sense. Um, and I'm thinking about like and the fact that you could use it to like get a lighter sentence in court is bananas.
Yeah.
That is bananas. Um, but I guess like but as you said, there are modern examples, and I'm just wondering like what's going to be our mesmerism? What are we going to look back on in like 40
Oh,
years and be like, I can't believe we thought that this was real.
that's true. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what are we going to claim we were under the influence of that later they're going to be like, come on. Social
Yeah.
social media
Yeah,
made
I
me
know exactly. It's
buy the skincare. Yeah.
exactly if slash when like Instagram explodes, like inshallah that happens in our lifetime. But like it's going to be impossible to explain to future generations like the hold that has on us.
Yeah. Yeah. We would just shop and we couldn't stop doing it because we saw reels that told us to shop, something like that.
Yeah, and it was no, you don't understand. It was created to make us do this. Like
Yes. It
we're
made
gonna
us
wind
spend
up like the
hours. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna wind up like the Victorians telling them to take like mustard baths and shit because that's what we used to do. um, so you were talking about planning the book, and as someone who is not a planner, I'm so interested in hearing about your writing process for this book, and especially because you've got like multiple perspectives on the same story. What was your process like keeping that just yeah, what was your process like?
Oh, it was a little messy because I have three point of view characters. So there's Faith, the possible mesmerist, Abby Mendenhall, the treasurer of the Bethany home, and then May, who is Faith's roommate, who has secrets of her own, and she's in like she's a very unreliable narrator. They all are to some degree, but mostly May. So I had a tight timeline. It's only a few months long. I knew that I had to work in a crime, and I ended up bumping the crime up by 2 days. I just felt like I wrote myself into a corner, and I was like, I'm just going to explain this in the author's note. Mostly accurate, but I need it to happen here, and Thanksgiving is here. But yeah, it's like Thanksgiving was on November 29th that year. Yeah, it's basically like mid-October to mid-December. And all of these things had to happen. And also, I had to decide, well, when this happens, whose point of view are we in, and what information are we going to get? And as their secrets are revealed, like who's revealing them? Am I going to let another character do it, or are they going to reveal it themselves?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I like when you have an unreliable narrator with other or she's not a narrator, she's a point of view character. When you have somebody who's unreliable and then you have other perspectives who can kind of provide their own spin on things or provide
Hmm.
some truth. I think that's satisfying. So that helped me kind of keep the reader informed, even when like May or even Faith or Abby were like withholding something. But yeah, it was kind of a lot to keep track of. And then I really wanted to see like how are they all, the three of them all going to play a role in like bringing justice in the end. So they all have sort of a different
Hmm.
role to play, and that was really fun to put that together.
That's so cool. I love the idea of like using other point of view characters as like almost fact checkers for a
Yeah.
character who's maybe not being totally truthful, or like that's a really fascinating way to use it. Yeah, and so um I've never used an unreliable narrator. But I would love to know like what's it like writing an unreliable narrator? What's fun about it? Tell me about that.
I think this was the first time that I really did. And it's challenging because you don't want, I don't know, you don't want it to be too obvious. And then
Hmm.
the reader feels, I think, patronized, you know.
Yeah.
But you also don't want it to be too obscure where the reader has no idea what's going on in the book because the character is giving, like I have felt frustrated by too unreliable narrators where I'm like, well, I don't know
Hmm.
what to believe. I would like some sense of concrete reality here. And I think because it was May seems very practical in the moment, but she's very repressed about her past and her
Mm.
desires. But I let the desires kind of come out, in bursts. She's a very sexual person and
Hmm.
she shouldn't be. Um,
Right.
of
That's not
course.
what good girls do.
Yeah, exactly. That's really been drilled into her. Um, and yeah, I mean, I figured since it's mostly about her past, it wouldn't make the book as confusing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, I'll tell you a little tidbit. The book was originally called Ghost Mother, and then we had to change the
Hmm.
title because there was another Ghost Mother coming out around the same time. But I did lose kind of a reveal where I felt like as you're reading, you're wondering who is the ghost mother of the title, and you think it's
Yeah.
her, and then it's like sort of revealed to be another one, and then that was sort of lost. But that's okay. I like the title, The Mesmerist, better, but
Yeah,
that
it's a
was
good
going to
title.
be one of my like unreliable narrator reveals. Just the process of publishing.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Lucky Red was not originally Lucky Red. It was just
Oh,
Red. And then it was pointed out to me that single word titles are really rough on like search engines. So
Interesting. Oh, search engines. Wow. Yeah, the things we have to.
But yeah, well, it's like a single word title that is also just like barely more than a concept, like red. Um, yeah, so they were like, can we like tighten this up a little bit? So yeah, it's sometimes
Oh, yeah. Well, so I have a
sometimes it
question for
happens.
you because there were a lot of references to her luck throughout the book. Were those already
Mhm.
there?
Yes, those were already there. It was already the second sort of like the secondary theme, or like this a secondary sort of like engine. I
I assume
yeah,
so. Yeah. Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. That's a good
yeah.
title.
I oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, no, I really like where we ended up. It's it's just the way things go. But I love also this thing you've been saying about May being very repressed. Like desire is always is a great engine for lying and unreliability.
Yes. Yeah. Um, May. Yeah, May is really
Yeah.
about like what she wants. May is a character who at the beginning of the book you find her insisting that she does not belong at the Bethany home, that she's somehow kind of better than everybody else there. And the other
Right.
women at the home don't like her for that reason. And I think they
Mhm.
have a good reason to. But I wanted the reader's sympathy for May to grow as the book goes on, as you realize
Mhm.
what her background is, why she's so convinced that she has to return to Chicago with a husband, a respectable husband, is what she thinks she needs. And
Mhm.
she's sort of determined to press that reset button on her life. Sort of what we were saying at the beginning of the chat, which is like this false notion that you can just go back and just go be born rich, or you just
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that, like, well, you're out of luck. May wishes that she could just go back to where she was, and of course, you can't go home again. Like, that's not possible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but like talk about a relatable wish. Like we all have I'm sure everybody listening to us right now can think of like a moment that they would love to go back to and like whoop, take the
Oh
other
yeah,
path.
absolutely.
Um this book is so full of these amazing rich female characters. Um and and First of all, I think we're going to make this our last question to
Okay.
make sure that we have time for Q&A.
Great.
But this book is so full of these amazing, rich, complex female characters, and I would love to know, like, if anybody's especially close to your heart, or if there's anybody that you really relate to, or what. I know that, like, you when you're working on a novel, you spend literal years, like, very close to these people, and you wind up with relationships with them, and so who's close to your heart?
They are all close to my heart. Abby, I really felt like I got to know Abby in her journals, and she went from being like a stern Quaker woman dressed all in black, she's 63 years old, to someone really fun and self-deprecating. Her in her journals, she seemed very caged in and sort of bored in her domestic role. Like on her 37th birthday, she wrote, "My life at present is very monotonous. I never leave the house." It was something like that. "I rarely leave the house, and isn't this supposed to be all that a woman aspires to?" And then less than 10 years later, she founds the Sisterhood of Bethany. And the first thing that she and two other women do is they go bail two madams out of jail. They bail out the madams, they bring the madams back to one of their houses. And you can just feel this palpable excitement in her journal entry. She's like, "We were there, we were with these madams, and we didn't know what to do." But it was like she came alive after that. And I'm sure there were people who thought she was annoying because she would do things like read the Bible in parlors of brothels, and they were probably rolling their eyes. But I think that she liked to be among these women and really liked trying to help them, would really take them into her house if they needed extra care, would spend the night at the home. And I loved picturing, like, what would her nightgown look like? Like she's just
Yeah.
the night at the home. I thought she was really interesting, and I developed a lot of affinity for her.
Yeah. Oh, she sounds like it. Yeah. She sounds like an amazing, like, historical person to get to know. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Yeah, it's everything about this is so fascinating. And I love that she like comes alive by doing this social work out in the world.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, and I love to know that she had a sense of humor about herself because goddamn, she would have to. Like, because
she
she
did.
does do some shit that's super annoying, like read the Bible to sex workers who are like, I'm on the clock, bitch.
Right? Like, this isn't going to change anything,
Yeah.
right? You'd be like, gee, okay, well, I'm done. Yeah, very funny. She did ask, there was one entry that like really stuck out to me where she asked, I wonder if God can tell when I'm being sarcastic. And I loved I was like, it spoke to some intelligence for me because I thought, well, she clearly knows that it's that lip service isn't, true faith. Like she's like, can God tell when I'm being sarcastic? I loved that.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm sure the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yes, God definitely knows.
So,
Julie, welcome back.
Hello. Yeah. Oh, and because you touched on a little bit at the beginning and touching on it at the end. Um, it's so fascinating that she was doing something so anti what normally would be happening to these women, and that she had the courage to do that. And probably like her people thought she was, but it's like, what was her daily life with her friends?
yeah.
And what were they thinking about her doing this, you know?
I know she was a thorn in the side of the city council and the
Well,
mayor.
yeah.
I didn't
Yes.
get into that, but
Yeah, fuck them up, Abby.
yeah, I got the sense that the men in charge of Minneapolis were equally annoyed by the madams and the Sisterhood of Bethany, and that the two were often on the same side of things, and they just didn't like either of these powerful groups of women who had a lot of power.
Right.
So it was very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure they saw it as like, I'm sure they were very sort of like upset and got their feathers ruffled by the fact that these like highly respectable women and these sex workers are like banding, they're on the same side. They're like, no, we need that can't possibly, you're
It
two
must it,
totally different creatures. Like,
it must have blown their minds because the
yeah,
men were probably like, wait a minute.
I agree. Yeah, they were yeah, it was just amazing. I have to think it's somewhat unique, but I'm sure there are other stories like this that have happened in other cities and other times. But this was
Yeah.
really
I mean, yeah. Did you talk? I mean, because I was doing something. Did you talk about where you found that story, where you found the Bethany house? Did you talk about that at the very beginning?
You know what? I can't remember. It was
Okay.
so long ago, and I wish I remember where I found it. I think it may have been in a book about Jane Addams, and it was like there was like a one line Sisterhood of Bethany in or Bethany Home in Minneapolis, and I went like straight to Google and then just took off from there.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how that one little thing could just
Oh
spark
yeah,
this whole thing?
yeah. I
Okay,
wish I
Diane.
could.
Yeah, Diane has a question. She says you did an outstanding job of engaging the reader and creating suspense. You said it's a delicate balance between being too obvious and yet you don't want the reader to be lost. You achieve the perfect balance. How did you do this?
Oh wow. Thank you. I I think I think it was through the multiple points of view. Um, and also providing enough like context clues about May. I think that right away you're going to be a little suspicious of May claiming that she doesn't really belong here. Like as soon as someone says that, you're like, oh yeah, you do, honey. I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Um, but I still wanted some like penny drop moments. I never the women who entered the Bethany home got to choose their own names, and I don't want to give anything away, but like I think
Right.
there are some fun and like rewarding moments about like the names that the women have chosen or that they used to have, or the way that those are used, the way that a friend of one of my beta readers said that she loved how like namelessness can be turned into a power. um and I liked playing with that, so I thought this could get a little confusing with like all the different names, but I think the way like the reveals come, it manages to be
Right.
understandable.
Definitely does. All right, Dave has a question here. He says, this is such a well-written and meticulously researched novel. How much time did you spend on the research?
Oh, thank you. On the research, so probably about a year, but I was writing almost the whole time that I was doing research. I think I read those first two nonfiction books back to back before I really wrote anything. And then after that, I was like reading all of Abby's journals, um, reading The Awakening, looking at, I went to Minneapolis and I like looked at, they had the blueprints of the Bethany home in the historical archive, like the original architect's blueprints, transcripts from the trial, some streetcar maps, that kind of thing. But as I did all of that while writing, because I find that if I try to do like too much research in a big block, then I will forget things. So
Right.
I also look very specifically into like whatever I happen to be writing about, in that moment. So like there's a scene in a fancy ice cream parlor, which they used to have all kinds of food, apparently, not just ice cream. So that I went in on a deep dive, like old photos of ice cream parlors and old men. I love looking at old menus. I always get way too into old menus. You can find so many online, so many menus, and like I just like to put the weirdest things that people used to eat, into the
I was
book.
going to say what they called things, the
Oh,
names of some of the food.
oh yeah. Well, there's so many. There's always like the cold meats section of the menu and like cold chicken is, like on every old menu. And we would find that so unappealing today. And that's like, then it was so normal. Like, here's the cold chicken section of the
Yeah.
menu.
It's like, what is
I love that.
it? Did you go back and
Yeah.
forth to Minneapolis multiple times, or did you just take like one trip?
I
Did you
took
go?
one big trip.
Okay.
Yeah, and tried to squeeze in everything I possibly could. And I'm gonna go next month. I'll be at the Twin Cities Book Festival in St. Paul on October 19th. Yeah, I'm very
Oh,
excited.
they would they'll love that this book is about them, about their state.
I hope so.
So I know we're talking about this book, but we have to ask the question on, are you writing something new? Are you working on something that you can talk about, or not quite yet?
I am. I'm working on something set in Chicago in the 20s. And
Fun.
it's going to be women centered again, and not like the story that you would expect. It's not bootleggers and Al Capone. There are police involved, but yeah, I guess that's all I can say because I haven't gotten that far with it.
Right.
But yeah, it'll be another like powerful woman historical mystery
Love it.
slash. Yeah.
Claudia, is something eminent coming from you? Are you working on something new?
Yeah, I am. Well defined enough. It's not nearly so well defined as what Carolyn just said, but yeah, I'm plugging away. It turns out, yeah, second novels are tough. Um,
Yeah. And everybody expects them to come out. It's like, okay, where is it? It's like you
yeah, yeah.
had all this time to write that first one, right? How
Well,
long
and,
did
and I wrote the first one so fast. I
Oh,
wrote
you
the first
did?
one so
Okay.
fast that I was like, yeah, I wrote Lucky Red in a year, and so then I
Oh,
was like, so then I finished editing Lucky Red, and a year later I was like, where's my book? What the hell is going on? I don't have enough. What? So
I know it is so hard to come up with a new idea every time. Every time
yeah,
it has to be
I
unique
know.
and
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this,
I
yeah, and the whole process of it all and getting it to where it's actually a published product is a whole other conversation. Just a general question to both of you. Caroline, I'll start with you first. Did you know you always wanted to be an author? I mean, was this something that you always were looking at, like, I want to write a book?
No, I don't think I realized until the very end of college. I thought about going to law school and then I could have either studied for the LSAT or worked on a novel so it was sort of brewing. And I was like, I'm going to work on this novel. And that one didn't get published, but it did change my life because I did not go to law school. Um, but yeah, I thought I always loved to read, but I didn't really think about becoming an author until then.
Until you really started looking at it as something that you could do as a career.
Yeah, and I self-published a book of ghost stories when I was in high school. But even after doing that, I don't know. I didn't think it was going to be my career, but I'm very happy that it is.
Yeah. How about you, Claudia? Was it always something that you knew it's like I've got to write a book?
Oh yeah, my earliest we had when I was a kid, we had this little school desk from my grandmother was a teacher, and she had like one of those old Charlie Brown desks with the lift up top and the attached chair for like a kindergartner. And like my earliest memories are being at that desk making books. They were about Ariel and my little ponies, like, doing whatever. But yeah, it's always been about books for me. I think, after I took 10 years off after college to like read and learn how to be a person. Um, but time well spent.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah, instead of an MFA, I read books for a decade. Yeah, that was always the thing. When for my 11th birthday, my parents gave me a copy of Harriet the Spy, which was sort of a rite of passage book in our family.
Favorite. Love it.
And I was like, oh, I get this. This makes thank you. I was waiting for this information. I didn't know, like, I hadn't made the connection that like writers were, that it was a job that you could grow up to be. There was just something that I hadn't connected. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. And so I haven't left the house without a notebook since like the fall of 1995.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
I love it. And when people ask what their favorite kids book is, and Harriet the Spy was my favorite book as a kid. It was
I mean,
just,
it's so good.
it's so good.
Good.
You
It's
know what? I have a
just,
9-year-old daughter, and now I'm thinking I should give her Harriet the Spy.
it would be curious to say. I mean, if it held up, I mean, it was I mean, I'm way older than you girls. And if it held up for you, Claudia, I have a feeling it'll hold up for your daughter too.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, it's something
And
universal.
Harriet is 11 in the book. So
Oh,
if
perfect.
you want to get the matchup, and
Oh, yeah.
there's some sixth grade social dynamics in play in that book that are quite intense.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay, good
yeah, it's
tip.
all about sixth grade and like
Oh,
learning how to act right around people all over again. Um,
she would be into that. I think maybe like you always like to read up. So
yeah, that's a good one.
See
there
what
are
the big
fourth
girls
grade
are doing.
dynamics too.
It seems like every
Yeah.
grade these days, right? All right, ladies, we're running out of time. Just real quick, I want to ask for you, Claudia, for people that want to maybe follow you on social media, or do you have a website? Where could you direct people to find out more about you and what you're working on next?
Yeah, so I do have a website. It's claudiacravens.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram at claudia.cravens. You got to get the dot or you're going to get somebody else.
I love it. And there's all those little things that you got to tell people to do. I love it. But I'm sure those links are on your website though. So that sometimes is the quickest way to
Yes,
do it. Go to
it's
the
linked on
website.
my website. If you want to see pictures of what I'm reading and how cute my dog is, and she is very cute, I recommend checking out my Instagram.
Love it. Maybe some pictures of the garden too, right?
yeah, definitely. The garden. Well, it's fall here now, so,
Oh,
but
so
yes.
pretty. Yeah, so pretty. And Caroline, for you, where would you like to send people to find out and to follow you on what you're doing?
Sure. So my website is carolinewoodswriter.com. And on Instagram, I'm at carolinewoods_books.
Okay. And that's another one, probably go link at her site and then you'll get
Yes.
right to her. That's why I always tell people to like go to their website. That'll be the quickest way to find them. This was so much fun. Caroline, it was great having you again.
Thank you,
Um,
Julie. Thanks
yep.
so much.
And
Great.
Claudia, it was great meeting you. Hope to have you back for your
Yes.
next book.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Julie, for hosting us. And to Warwick's for hosting us. And Caroline, it was so much fun to talk to you about this book. I'm so jazzed about your next one. Can't wait.
Claudia, thank you so much. Your questions were amazing, and it was such an honor to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye.